Right, in this video, what we're going to be looking at is how currencies change in value impacts on an economy. Okay, so we're going to be looking about what happens when currencies get weaker, so when they depreciate, and then we're going to be looking at what happens when currencies appreciate. Now, I'm going to start with depreciate because this is what's happening in Britain at the moment. At the time I'm putting this video together, I've been reading an article that the pound at some UK airports will now carry less than €1. It used to be, as high as €1.20, €1.30, and that the pound-dollar exchange rate has also fallen massively. And this is all because of what's happened post-Brexit. Okay, so you've got investors leaving the UK economy unsure about what's going to happen, so their demand for our currency is starting to fall. Right, okay, now just think about what will happen then. If the pound loses value, then one impact will be an increase in the costs of production. This will make the SRAS curve shift to the right. Okay, now the UK, as I'm sure you're completely aware, has got a huge trade deficit on the current account. We rely on importing lots and lots of essential raw materials from across the world. Well, firms are the same. When firms produce in the UK, they often need semi-finished goods or components or commodities from other economies across the world. If they've now got to sacrifice more pounds to buy the same amount of foreign currency, then in effect it means that these imports are now going to become more expensive to buy. So this will create cost-push inflation on the UK economy. And of course that will lead to higher cost of living, higher price levels, which could, on its own, lead to a reduction in real GDP and output, and therefore it could be a negative impact on employment. But to sort of counteract that, what will also happen though is that this aggregate demand curve should shift outwards. So we've got the formula for AD, C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Well, if imports become more expensive, then you'd argue, or you'd hope to think that what would happen is that import demand would start to fall over time. So production would shift away from foreign goods and services towards more domestic goods and services. Well, that would be a way of keeping money in our circular flow of income, output and expenditure. And on top of that, what should happen is we should have an export-led growth period as well. Exports will become more competitively priced across the world, which will boost export demand. So exports should in theory increase, and imports should in theory start to fall. So there you go, a big benefit for the UK economy. It should lead to overall an increase in output, so real GDP would increase. Increased domestic production will also create more jobs in Britain, and it should hopefully lead to a lower trade deficit. I think what I would say though is you've got to think about things like this: price elasticity of demand. Okay, well, just because imports become more expensive doesn't mean that we can shift away towards domestic goods and services. We are assuming that UK firms will be able to produce in the UK. Well, if they can't, they're still forced to buy those expensive imports. We're also assuming that the weak currency will lead to UK goods becoming more popular across the world. Again, there's no sort of guarantee that would happen. You've also got to think about the size of the change on the exchange rate. See, a much bigger fall in the currency value will have a much bigger impact than what a smaller one would do. We're also going to think about time lags. Okay, I've been reading about the fact that in the UK economy, that import prices are increasing, but at the moment it's not creating cost-pushing inflation. That's because many firms have already bought their resources, or they've already bought their currency before the depreciation to counteract it. So if it stays a bit longer term, it'll have a much bigger impact than what it is short term. And then let's think about the opposite then, a currency appreciation. Right, okay, well, it's the exact opposite really. A currency appreciation will mean that business costs start to fall. So in theory, what should happen is, let's go back a page, then SRAS this time should move outwards. firms can now, in effect, buy foreign goods so just cheaper than what they could do before. They can access essential imports of commodities, natural resources, semi-finished goods, things from retailers at lower prices than what we could do before. That should push down prices. But overall, the downside to this will be that aggregate demand will plummet. Exports will fall due to higher export prices, and imports will increase due to them now becoming cheaper to buy into the UK economy. This could be bad for our competitiveness. I mean, our current account gets worse. Could lead to growing unemployment, loss of more comparative and absolute advantages, which could lead to job losses. So it looks quite bad for the economy. Okay, but again, what we've got to assume is that this stuff can happen overnight. Again, elasticity is an important consideration. Just because our imports are cheaper doesn't mean we're going to suddenly buy lots more of them. We might stick to a very similar quantity of imports. If we do, then we're actually sacrificing less foreign currency to buy them. They in effect become cheaper to buy, so it could actually improve our trade deficit, which means you get the benefits of lower prices without actually boosting your trade deficit. And if things become cheaper, then domestic consumers might be able to buy more domestic goods and services too. You could also argue that the drop in AD can be overcome. Monetary and fiscal policy can be used to expand aggregate demand back up to counteract that fall in aggregate demand.